Special thanks to Proximatic for helping me out with this video. Some of this stuff would not have been found if not for him. Seriously, this guy is the MVP. Forget about Android 17. Anyway, onto the video. Welcome, ladies and degenerates, to this absolutely massive info dump on some of the things you may not have known about the Hyperdimension Neptunia series. Some of this stuff you might already know, but hey, you might be able to learn a thing or two with this video. We've got quite a lot to go through, and I don't want to spend any more time torturing myself with the editing of this video. So you know what? Let's go. Did you know? The Hyperdimension Neptunia series as a whole was potentially never meant to go past the original game on the PlayStation 3. Yep, you heard me right. Some of your favourite waifus from later entries might not have been planned to exist. Scary, huh? In the original game's true ending, all the goddesses agreed that they should be left alone, as they'd only continue fighting each other in the console war again. As such, they choose to give up their powers, let a new goddess rule in their place, and then eventually grow old and die in the far future, when game industry sees a new era of peace. Obviously, with the death of the main characters in this manner, the series was likely going to be discontinued, and it would have all ended there. In addition, during an interview for the celebration of the 10th anniversary of Neptunia, the creator of this series, Mizuno, bless her heart, says she didn't expect the Neptunia series to last for 10 years and get as popular as it did, meaning that she was likely intending for the original game to be a one-and-done deal, as she expressed concerns that Western gamers would not find the game very appealing due to its nature. However, in spite of the worries that the game wouldn't be a hit, the game succeeded pretty well in the West. Thus, the developers were inclined to release a follow-up game. Obviously though, the ending, and really the game's plot as a whole, was immediately retconned in the sequel game Hyperdimension Neptunia Mark II, where the series was very quickly rebooted to allow for more variety and sequels to arise. This would lead to the decision to have the original game's events take place in another dimension, which is referred to as the Super Dimension, and have the actual canon events take place in the Hyperdimension, something that's actually touched upon a little bit in the remake of the original game, Rebirth 1.
Mizuno is a gift, and we should all thank her for making this series as good as it is. We wouldn't even be here with this video if it weren't for her determination.
Speaking of the original game, it actually ran out of money during development, meaning, yes, the original game was unfinished. You can tell that this is the case a bit with some of the same environments, map layouts, and even monsters from other games developed by Idea Factory and Compile Heart, with some backgrounds from Record of Augurast War, Trinity Universe, and Artonico being used for the game. As for the monsters, some of them come from Cross Edge and Trinity Universe. A lot of this was remedied in Rebirth 1, along with some extras that weren't present in the original game. Unfortunately, reused assets are a theme that reoccurs throughout most of the franchise, and is still happening to this day. They are getting better though, needless to say, with character models, environments, and even the live 2D being greatly improved, but it's still sad to see. Noir, Blanc, and Vert originally didn't have solidified names in the original PS3 game, and once you recruited them into your party, you got given the chance to name them, which is actually pretty weird looking back on it. By default, their names ended up as Noir, Blanc, and Bert, but since then, these names have become their actual names starting with Mark II. Imagine what would happen if you were allowed to keep the custom names in future games. On the topic of Noir, Blanc, and Bert, according to a statement by Mizuno, Noir, Blanc, and Bert were supposed to be the main characters, and the three were even supposed to be sisters. Neptune wasn't even thought of at the time. It's crazy that she had the possibility of not being a part of this franchise.
I'd be the saddest man alive if she wasn't brought into existence.
The original game's trailer advertised that you'd be able to play as the goddesses in the middle part of the game, but when the game actually released, you only get to play with them in the final dungeon, and potentially post-game. The original game was also the only time in the series you'll ever see all four goddesses carry a pistol of some sort alongside their regular weapons. The only character that retains these guns outside of the Super Dimension is Neptune, though through another alternate version of her that we only get to fully see in Megadimension Neptunia V2, that being Ultra Dimension Neptune. Warachu's appearance and affiliation with the ASIC in Hyperdimension Neptunia Mark II can actually be spoiled before even meeting up with him. When beating the Underling, or Linda, for the first time, Her theme is unlocked in the music playlist in the museum. The name of said theme? Warachu's theme. This foils his appearance as part of the ASIC way before the reveal even happens. These silly devs, not making a unique thing for Lender. Oh well. According to an easily missable chirper dialogue from Ramen Writer, Noir's favourite kind of ramen is the microwavable cup noodles from Nissan. Despite being only the third game in the series, Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory is still filled with a truckload of references. A few notable ones would include the quest to kill 5 Cubirals, with the client's name being Uni Soundalike, a blatant nod to Puella Magi Madoka Magica, since Uni and Sayaka share the same Japanese and English voice actresses, those being Eri Kitamura and Sarah Ann Williams for the Japanese and English dubs respectively. One of the DLC dialogue scenes with mages has her repeatedly called Noir her assistant, whom expresses disdain for being labelled as one. This is a nod to Steins Gate, more specifically, the relationship between Makase Kirisu and Rintaro Okabe. It should also be noted that Noir's Japanese voice actress also voiced Kirisu. Imagine that. This one is Japan only, but Vert also shares the same weapon as Mikoto from Cross Edge. Not the other Mikoto from A Certain Scientific Railgun though, whom, funnily enough, also possesses a spear. Like Neptunia Mark II, a lot of the characters that show up later in the story of Victory can be spoiled in a multitude of ways. Neptune's status page shows that she has Lily rank points with Nep gear, even though you only fight alongside her after the system is made available, which spoils her appearance before she arrives in the Ultra Dimension.
She should have stayed in Hyperdimension so that she didn't have to get irised.
The DLC weapons can spoil which CPU characters will join your party since they're made available in your inventory immediately after getting them, regardless of where you are in the story. As such, Yuli, Rom, Ran, and Kishi being playable get spoiled here. And lastly, it's possible to purchase crafting recipes for costumes and accessories for party members that you don't have yet.
Oops.
In Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory, Neptune ponders where her Ultra Dimension counterpart is, with the others pondering that if she had all of Neptune's laziness without a CPU's immortality, she would have starved to death a long time ago. Come Megadimension Neptunia V2, and what happens when Ultra Dimension Neptune meets up with Uzume and Netgear?
Plus, I've run out of food, so I've been on the brink of starvation for a little while.
This is one of the many hints to the player that this is indeed the Neptune from the Ultra Dimension before she's revealed as such. If you actually remember that scene from Victory. Otherwise, Ultra Neptune will name drop Plutia, and then it'll click. Some of the scouts you can get in the games are references to other series. The scout named Misuo is a parody of the infamous Mist Rex from Super Robot Wars K, and most of his lines are parodies of Mist's horribly written dialogue from that game, such as, "This world isn't worth saving!" and "I'm used to suppressing riots." Mr. Akai is a reference to Ash Ketchum from the well-known Pokemon series, where his design is similar with the backwards red hat, a bag on his left hip, likely supposed to be similar to Ash's backpack, and a purple creature on his right side that looks similar to Pikachu. Kiryu is a reference to Kirito, or Kazuto Kirigaya, from the Sword Art Online series. The scout's design shows him dual wielding, which Kirito does in his home series, and he also has a robe-esque clothing design. While not exactly concrete, the Watermelon Penguin Scout appears to be a reference to the pretty creature from the Disgaea series. The Scout is a blue penguin with a bag on its waist, which is what the Prinny looks like, excluding the watermelon that the Scout holds. Some dungeon names are references to other games and even systems, companies, and others. As a quick disclaimer, not all of the references will be listed here, just the more notable ones. There's plenty of references that I could have gone over, and really there are. But to be honest, do you want to sit here and listen to me reading the names of fictional environments for more than 5 minutes? I guarantee you won't. If you're not interested in seeing this, you can skip to the timestamp on the screen right now, or click onto the next chapter using the new YouTube feature. So, in the original Hyperdimension Neptunia, a dungeon called Hyrule Castle is a reference to the location of the same pronunciation from the Legend of Zelda series, Hyrule Castle. A dungeon called Micro Park might be a reference to the racetrack originating from Mario Kart Double Dash, Baby Park. Something to note is that, despite both of these being references to a duo of Nintendo series, these are both dungeons located in the Lean Box rather than the Wii. In Rebirth 1, a dungeon in Planeptune is called Neo Geo Front, with the name being a reference to the Neo Geo system produced by SNK Corporation and released in 1990. Knights' Dimension is a reference to the character Knights and their home series, developed by Sega. Hyrule Snowfield in Lowee is a reference to the location called Hyrule from the Legend of Zelda series. Donkey Kong Ruins is a reference to the character named Donkey Kong from the Mario series. Uwe Ruins is a reference to the Wii console, developed by Nintendo. Similarly, a dungeon named the D's Snow Forest is a reference to the Nintendo DS handheld console. MS Mountain in Mi Box is a reference to the company Microsoft. Microsoft is sometimes shortened to MS, like in MS Paint for example. In Mach 2, Atari Marsh is a reference to the Atari series of consoles, developed by the company of the same name. In Victory, the Otori Cave is similarly another reference to the Atari series of consoles. Jet Set Range is a reference to the Jet Set Radio series. Vita Dimension is a reference to the PlayStation Vita handheld console. Bandy Crash is a reference to the Crash Bandicoot series and the character of the same name. PS Dimension is a reference to the PlayStation, if that wasn't obvious enough. Sony Wetlands is a reference to the company Sony. Metroid Space is a reference to the Metroid series, created by Nintendo. Duh. Sega Forest is a reference to the company Sega. MS Magma Cave is a reference to the company Microsoft. Saying the name of the dungeon out loud makes this clear. Smashbox Stadium could be a reference to the Super Smash Bros. Series, alongside one of Blan's hammers, namely the Smash Brawl hammer. Both the Netplunker and Netplunker Zero dungeons are a reference to the Spelunker games.
Screw these dungeons, they suck!
And lastly, Gralange Point is a reference to the game Lagrange Point developed by Konami. Gralange is an anagram of Lagrange. And now we move on to perhaps the largest section of this video, which is covering the concept art of the characters. There's tons of interesting concept art to see, so let's get through it. As such, take any theories that will be brought up in this section with a grain of salt. One of the more interesting pieces of concept art are these early designs for Noir, Blanc, and Bert's HDD forms. They're depicted with animalistic eyes and this strange unidentifiable insignia, potentially Celestials considering this is on all of them. Interestingly enough, however, none of Neptune's HDD concept art has any of these shared features, suggesting that something sets her apart from the rest. Perhaps maybe the true goddess? However, this exclusion could be because Neptune was the last of the CPUs to be conceptualized, and by that point, they had scrapped the ideas of the eyes and the insignia. Noir and Blanc in particular had very interesting changes compared to their final designs for the original game. Noir was originally going to sport a more noble looking dress, and most of the concept design sported red hair, you know, the good old tsundere colour, and blue eyes instead of her now respected black and red. This design is actually quite similar to the current design we're all familiar with. Blanc's outfit, in comparison to our final design, is seemingly more of a palette swap, though with one major difference. Her signature hat is completely missing, instead being replaced by a giant bow that I'm pretty sure Reimu would like back. Okay, forget the bow, she's got almost everything here. Getting back on topic, the whole colour scheme, most notably including her hair, is primarily a mixture of differing shades of blue, potentially referencing the Nintendo Wii's glowing disk drive. It could even be argued that the designs were changed last minute, as the pre-final drafts for Noir and Blanc retained their concept designs, and even had fully fledged sprite images made for them before they were scrapped. Noir in particular is pretty much just a colour change, given how the drop pieces are identical to that of a current design, but just with differing colours. This same early Blanc design was intended to be reused for a completely separate character, named MP Tesco within the design's file name, and even had a full-blown sprite made just for her. Sadly, as the art book aptly puts it, such an inhuman name invites sympathy. Her design looks complete, and yet she never appears in the game. Poor MP Tesco. Neptune went through a whole slew of changes before we got to the bubbly lilac-haired goofball we all know and love today. At first she had the light blue hair and a different set of clothing. Her head accessories had a hue of blue on them, and the clothing underneath her transparent dress was also coloured blue, which could also be related to the planet Neptune, and how it is a blue planet. Obviously, this design wouldn't stay very long. One design later, and the colour scheme was sent back to the drawing board. Her dress was changed into something more frilly, and her whole colour scheme wildly shifted from blue to red, though it retained some light blue in her accessories and eyes. Another thing that's interesting to know is how Histoire seems to retain some elements from this design, most notably the spherical accessories. One could possibly argue that Hyperdimension Histoire's design was based on this design of Neptune too. The reddish design would stick around for a few iterations, and was even going to be given a trident as seen in the little note under Style A, until a standout lilac hair was chosen and then solidified for a final design. Her dress also evolved into a classic Parker dress, with the frilly dress concept making a return in Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory in the form of the Josie dress, although they would eventually switch back to the Parker dress for every installment after Hyperdimension Noir. Her D-pad hair clips can also be seen in the pre-final draft design. Speaking of Histoire, her earlier designs looked a lot closer to Neptune herself, perhaps suggesting that she was not only conceptualized after her, but was perhaps even intended to be more closely connected to Neptune. Obviously, such a connection didn't end up happening until Mark II, where Histoire became the Oracle of Planeptune, but it's still interesting to think about. Curiously, Greenheart, in early development, was actually planned to use a lance as a weapon, rather than a spear. This, obviously, was changed to make the weapon types more consistent between human and goddess forms, as Vert uses a spear as well. Interestingly, however, the idea of a lance being used as a weapon was actually brought back in Megadimension Neptunia V2, being used by Dark Green, one of the 4 Dark CPUs. It was actually made as a way to imitate Greenheart, likely referencing the fact that Greenheart was originally designed to use this lance weapon. Remember that image of the main 4 goddesses in some form of beta design? Of course you do, it wasn't even 3 minutes ago. Well, interestingly, Vert's green hair in that picture is actually reused in later games as part of her Elite Dress Plus outfit, where her hair turns bright green in coordination with her outfit. Here's what it looks like in Rebirth 1, and here's what it looks like in B2. Wait, whoa, hold the phone? Wait, is that the Omnitrix on her pelvis? Even though Compo is the character that went through, by far, the least amount of changes, if any at all, there's a peculiar design of her in a nurse outfit. Rather fitting, to be honest. This design has been snipped and reused a few times before, one of which is the Compile Heart processor unit you can obtain in B2. There have been different variations of this nurse outfit in both 4 Goddesses Online and Ninja Wars, where Compo can be seen in different nurse-like outfits. Hopefully this design comes back in full for a canon game at some point. Ever wondered why IF is so infatuated with demonic stuff and typically has these daydreams referenced in her weapons and skills? It's because her earlier iterations depict her as an actual more mature looking demon. Nepgear had quite an interesting development throughout her conception, starting out with a school uniform and a more HDD looking design, suspiciously looking a hell of a lot like Origami and Sirin. Her style would switch back and forth between a more robotic looking being and a schoolgirl, before the decision was made to settle her into her final appearance with a signature sailor uniform. The robotic designs were repurposed into her personal interests, and potentially resulted in her having the same massive knack for machinery and technology that we're all too familiar with.
You'll see, Neptune. They'll all see. My device isn't ready yet, but we'll make game industry a better place. You and I would have our accomplishments published, and we'd become super popular forever and ever.
Uh-huh. You sure said a lot of stuff that some would consider insane, but hooray! I'm so happy and stuff, sis.
Interestingly enough, the black sailor dress idea would actually go on to be used for an NPC character called Nepugia, or Nepgeo in Mark II, who looks like Nepgear physically, but wears different clothes and acts differently. Nepgear, especially in her HDD form, looked wildly different from the iteration that most fans know and love today, especially the yellow design. In fact, if you compare these concept designs to the current design we're all familiar with, you can see that Nepgear was originally going to look very different from her older sister. If the sibling design choice was even going to be the case just based on the header saying Neptunia Mark II Hero and Initial Designs. They probably didn't even plan on Nepgear being Neptune's sister until later on in development, but take this with a grain of salt, as it's entirely speculative. More on the topic of Nepgear's HDD form, it actually went through an interesting development after the initial designs were scrapped in favour of making her look more like Neptune. It first started out highly resembling her sister's own processor unit, and even a similar hairstyle with twin braids, before gradually shifting into a more distinct, though still familiar outfit. The outfit itself was becoming more and more of a purple, dark bluish colour, before it eventually became a white and pink outfit. She was also planned to have a gradient fade from a darker purple, that once again resembles more of her sister, to a lighter blue near the end of her hair, though this was changed to a much lighter, creamy pink colour in the final version. This pre-final draft design appears to be reused as the Lilac Mark III processor unit, with the design resembling the Lilac Mark II processor unit in appearance, and the current Lilac processor unit in colour. Uni's design was handled in a much more confident manner, as the design only goes through pretty minuscule tweaks before reaching the final design. White hair stuck around for a large portion of her conception, but that was replaced with black to better resemble her sister, Noir. The white hair, however, would be reused for her HDD form. Man, it's like a tradition at this point. They sure love to reuse their early concept ideas, huh? Funnily enough, and just like before, her HDD form was originally planned to have black hair instead of white, but was swapped around in her final incarnation. The more traditional twin-tail design would evolve into the twin drill design, and parts of this design may have even been reused for her sister's Ultra Dimension self in Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory. The first design that you can see in the pre-final draft also is the cradle processor. The twins probably went through more changes than you ever will in your life through puberty. I swear, it's almost ridiculous. At first, the twins were designed with a more unified mindset, both sharing almost the exact same appearance with one another down to the same clothes, colour scheme, and seemingly personality based on their facial expressions. This design trend would continue for a few more iterations, with the twins even gaining heterochromia for a little while before getting scrapped. The twins would remain with the idea of having the same outfits up until the very end, only getting slight colour tweaks from one another to distinguish them a lot easier. It would also appear, from their facial expressions again, that Rom was supposed to be the one with the louder and more dominant personality, whilst Ram was supposed to be the more shy one. It's opposite day, people. It's opposite day. So, what about the HDD forms? It's probably going to be the same deal, right? Oh god damn it, now they decide to be more confident with them. Surprisingly, very much rather streamlined compared to before. A major feature that stuck around for many design iterations of the sisters' HDD forms were the robotic ears, which, as you've seen from other prior designs like HDD Noirs, they've been wanting to use this shtick for quite a while. And yet it didn't make it into any of the HDD designs we've seen so far. How tragic. Okay, that's all the time we've got for today. But subscribe now and you just might see a second video like this going more in depth on the other characters, and putting more focus on Victory and Megadimension Neptunia V2. I mean, come on. You do want to see the cool evolution of the coolest character in the series, Uzume, right?
Still the best written character, and just don't.
I've also got a lot more Neptunia content in transit on the way, both informative and silly. So be sure to stay tuned for some more, as Neptune would say, neptastic content. So with that, have a good rest of your day, and I hope to see you all in a future upload. Laters!